I had no idea where I fit in. I didn't feel like I was part of the Filipino society in the Philippines. I didn't feel like I was Filipino, basically. And then I didn't feel Chinese at all, even if my Mandarin now is not as good as it used to be, but I was very fluent. So I didn't feel at home there. I really felt at home with my friends, but all my friends left Beijing and I did too. And then when I moved to Hong Kong, I had no idea where home was. I was very confused. And when I moved to London, I felt like an outsider, but I also felt kind of comfortable in the environment. But all of that combined just led me to not really knowing how to understand myself, and then realizing that I didn't really know who I was.
Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's episode, I'm welcoming Jay. Jay is a third cultural kid, a speaker, and was born in the Philippines. She moved several times since she was young, which has led to a sense of disconnection from those who have a more rooted upbringing in a single country. This frequent disconnection often results in feelings of loneliness, depressions, uncertainty, and a thirst of belonging. Over the past 2 years, Jay has built a community and connected other third cultural kids worldwide. So thank you so much for being my podcast guest today. And I'm so looking forward to dive deeper into the conversation. And with this being said, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Tell us all about you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so great. I'm actually in an intercultural relationship myself, so I'm very happy to be here. My name is Jay, and I founded TCK Global, a community of third culture kids around the world in 2016. For those of you who don't know, a third culture kid is someone who's lived somewhere else for a longer period of time than in their parents' passport countries throughout their adolescent years. However, TCK Global's approach to inviting third culture kids includes anybody that's really felt a lack of sense of belonging through moving around and having a very uprooted upbringing, or just having a very uprooted life, even if they started out later in life. My community is all about belonging. And the reason why I started the community was because I found a lack of sense of belonging after having moved to Hong Kong, after having lived in Beijing for a very long time. So I was born in the Philippines, but then my family and I moved when I was 3 because my dad had a job with Procter & Gamble, which took him to China. So we moved to Guangzhou, and then we stayed there for a few years, and then we moved to Beijing when I was 7. My dad moved because of his job. And then we stayed there until I was 18. So I basically did first grade up until the end of IB, so 12th grade in Beijing. And I ended up building some roots there, which for me was really great. I made a lot of friends. We had moved to multiple houses, but it was around the same place, so it felt like a home for me. However, all of my friends most of them were from the international school that I went to. So everybody at some point left, including me, when we all moved for university. For university, I moved to Hong Kong. I initially studied fashion design, which I did not pursue. And in Hong Kong, I was asked, where are you from, or where's home for you? And for the first time, I didn't know how to answer it. And that was a very sad moment in my life because I really struggled with the idea of not having a home. And I was also very confused because nobody had explained what that feeling was prior to me leaving Beijing. And by the time I started thinking about what it really meant, I didn't have a home anymore because while my family was still in Beijing, all of my friends had left. And I also needed a visa to enter Beijing again. So to me, it was not a home anymore. So that was very confusing. And then after Hong Kong, I moved to London to pursue international marketing and international business. I did 2 masters, and I have lived in London ever since. So I've been in London for almost 10 years now in 2 months, which has been really up and down. The first 2 years were really exciting, getting to know a new place. It was much more culturally vibrant than Hong Kong, for me at least. So I really enjoyed that. And then the next few years, I decided to try and get citizenship, which meant I didn't have a choice to leave. So that was more emotionally taxing for me. And then I ended up working in the startup industry, which I've enjoyed a lot. And I've met my partner and I've met some really good friends. So the last 5 years for me have been really solid building blocks to building a home for myself, or at least a base. So that's been really, really great. And throughout that journey, I built TCK Global because I wanted to find others like me who shared similar experiences, even if we had moved from different, like if they had lived in different countries. I at the time could not for the life of me find anywhere where I could meet other third culture kids online or in person, apart from my friends that had come from the international school I grew up in. And I thought that was like crazy. So I decided to try and build one myself. And then over many years of trying, eventually it worked. And I started TCK Global on Instagram, and then we moved it to Slack in the very, very early stages. And then eventually it was a community decision to move us to Discord. And now we have Discord and WhatsApp groups around the world. So yeah, that is TCK Global, and that's a little bit of my story.
How big is the TCK Lily at the moment?
Yeah, and we Discord and WhatsApp together. Not everybody on either platform is on both platforms. We have a total of about 700 members, I think. I actually did it so we could have grown faster, but I wanted to take the approach of slow growth because to me, it was really important that members were screened, at least the earliest, like 500 members were screened before putting them inside to make sure that the space is actually, filled with third culture kids and not people who just want to make friends around the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But for this particular community, having a true sense of belonging with people who really have lived similar experiences was really important for me.
And you were talking about earlier, like the sense of belonging, sense of home. So I understand that you build, first of all, like the word home, what meaning does it have for you?
So home for me means, it's really a feeling of feeling safe, understood, and heard. I find home in people. Sometimes I find home in particular places, even if they're new places, because I feel safe in the environment. So like I grew up going back to a beach because my family's from the Philippines and we go back to the beach every summer. And now I live in London. I tend to go to a beach every year or more than once a year because it feels like home to me. And it doesn't have to be the same beach every time. So it's mostly a feeling of safety.
So not tied to a place. Yeah. That's something I can underline as well, because we are going through this journey as well. So if you would ask me, I was born in Germany. I lived there until I was 25, but it doesn't really feel like home, to be honest. Argentina slowly but little feels more cozy to me. Like it's a feeling I have. So I can basically, in my opinion, or my experience is that, yeah, I feel at ease here. I feel very welcomed. I feel like the people I'm surrounding myself with are actually the people I want to be surrounded by. And it all just makes sense in a way that I feel like that I do belong here, if that makes sense. But it's also more like a feeling. I don't think it really has something to do with Argentina, but great things are happening here for me at the moment. And it's interesting because I've been talking to so many intercultural couples that moved from one place to the other. And if you would ask them as well, like, what is home for you? The response would also be very similar to yours. Like, it's a feeling. It's not tied to a place. It's a feeling. So wherever I feel welcome, comfortable, whatever I need, wherever I can get it, that's what's home for me. So to those ones who are struggling with finding home, is there any advice you can share?
Well, I think finding home it can be difficult to do if you're actively looking for a place that you want to belong, primarily because, at least based on all of the conversations I've had with third culture kids, they have expectations that they list for themselves. And then because not every criteria of those expectations is met, they end up being quite disappointed when they're actively like really looking for a place to call home. So what I tend to tell them is look inside, think about what already makes you feel safe. Think about what already makes you feel happy, where you already feel heard. And those places or those people are probably the best places that you can find home in. Yeah, I think that would be my biggest tip. That's what I did. And I ended up being able to realize what home was for me through people and particular places just by looking in.
And basically, yeah, by building the community you've built over the past few years, being able to connect people with one another so that they make a similar experience to the one you've made. I think that's just like, I do have a lot of respect for your work, for what you're doing, for also for the educational part. Because obviously, if we wouldn't be in an intercultural relationship ourselves and having the plans we're having and doing, especially me doing what I'm doing now, the term of third cultural kid wouldn't have occurred to me, or you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't have crossed my mind that something like that are people like struggling with finding home, belonging, and all of this because they've basically of the history of moving from one place to the other. And this is what I just said in the little pre-talk we just had, that I feel like there are a lot of similarities as well, because a lot of things we're going through as an intercultural couple, and I mean, you're in an intercultural relationship yourself, are very similar to what third culture kids are going through when it comes to identity crisis, not feeling hunger, like the feeling of not belonging, depressions, and all of this. So I'm very curious about learning a little bit more about the challenges as well you faced over the past few years.
Yeah, okay. It's a big topic. Yeah, with a lot of things. But I will outline some of the bigger ones, or the ones that are most popular, I think, because they tend to recur throughout different generations if the parents don't address them. So one of the biggest problems is lack of education, which is why I've ended up turning my Instagram account into more of an educational online space for third culture kids. I am also actually building a content library out for third culture kids and their parents right now, and I'm working on some books. And it's the lack of education through international schools, where at the moment, some schools are starting to do it. But when I was growing up, teachers didn't really take into account what happens to the third culture kids' experience once they leave high school. So because there's a lack of education of what a third culture kid is, what feelings they'll experience, the normality of the feelings they'll experience, and resources where they can get help, which also don't all exist yet, are all things that are kind of barriers for third culture kids to feeling okay in their own skin. So lack of education is a really big one. The second one is feeling normal. When you're not educated, you don't feel normal in who you are. And when you don't feel normal, the problems that come up tend to center around not being able to make friends, or not being able to fit into or kind of shape your environment around you in the way that would be most healthy for you. So that typically tends to spiral into the lack of sense of belonging feeling, and then you isolate yourself because you don't know how else to cope apart from kind of not show who you really are and start to show a chameleon version of yourself to other people around you in order to fit in. But by doing this, what happens psychologically is the third culture kid doesn't end up connecting with the people that they're trying to connect with because they're being a chameleon to adapt to the environment. So they end up lonely. So those are the two biggest ones I can think of. And the third one is probably once a third culture kid figures out that they have a lack of sense of belonging, then they start to romanticize the idea of home. And then that's where the expectation list is, built over time. And then it makes it even more difficult to find a place to settle in because they're like, I want all of these things. These are everything I'm missing right now. These are the things that will make me happy. These are the bullet points I need to check in order to feel safe in my space. And so it makes it like a never ending cycle of where can I fit in? Where can I belong the most? And then you end up deciding as an adult to keep trying to find a home. So they end up looking outwards instead of inwards. I hope does that answer your question?
It definitely does. I mean, I do have a few follow-up questions when it comes to this, but I think I would like to push it like a little bit further to the end when it comes to resources. So let's talk about that later. I'm also a little bit curious about how your journey was in general, how you felt throughout the journey, if we can do a little deep dive on this. So up to the point where you built the community and where you got out with your story, what did you go through, if I may ask?
Of course. So I went through a lack of sense of belonging. I had no idea where I fit in. I didn't feel like I was part of the Filipino society in the Philippines. I didn't feel like I was Filipino, basically. And then I didn't feel Chinese at all, even if my Mandarin now is not as good as it used to be, but I was very fluent. So I didn't feel at home there. I really felt at home with my friends, but all my friends left Beijing and I did too. And then when I moved to Hong Kong, I had no idea where home was. I was very confused. And when I moved to London, I felt like an outsider, but I also felt kind of comfortable in the environment. But all of that combined just led me to not really knowing how to like understand myself, and then realizing that I didn't really know who I was. And so that took me through a very long journey of trying to figure out how to make my own close friends again in a very authentic way, and which I found quite difficult because I was also having to chameleon around and try and adapt around different environments around me, because as I was growing up, I was, entering the work environment and trying to see who I was in that environment, while also trying to figure out what kind of personal relationships I wanted in my life, what kind of partner I wanted. So it was a very confusing journey. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where home was. I didn't know what home was. I didn't know how to find it. And I didn't know how to build relationships that were the relationships that I wanted in my life. So it was all very, very confusing. But I did end up learning a lot through building the community of TCKs, because when you talk to other people who kind of go through that journey, the first thing is you start to feel really normal. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not alone in this. This is a normal process for me. I am now allowed to explore about myself. So finding that community was really helpful. Building it up was really helpful in my personal growth journey. But what I found it really helped me with was it allowed me to start exploring more deeper facets of my personality and what I really needed around me on a day-to-day basis. It basically allowed me to open up, finding like real friendships in the environment I was in and no longer needing to chameleon. And that for me has been the biggest or most impactful change, I think, because when you can build relationships around you on a personal, meaningful level, then you have the ability to provide yourself with some external support. And that is a big building block of developing some roots in a place. So it allowed me to kind of build my own roots in an environment for myself that doesn't tie me down to one specific location. So that's kind of my journey of my TCK story.
Can definitely identify a lot with the last part you've just shared with us. As I've mentioned before, like surrounding with yourself with like-minded people and building a community. It's just an incredible journey to be able, and luckily we have the tools for that nowadays to be able to connect like worldwide and get our stories out there and build in a new unique community, and that's growing beyond our expectations. And that's my favorite part of our journey as well. So thank you for doing a little deep dive on your journey. What I'm also curious about, like the questions you're getting. I mean, I'm sure there are people that are very curious about your story, and I've mentioned a couple of times you're sharing a lot about your personal story as well online. But if people ask you where you're from, starting with that, how do you answer this question?
I am now trained to decide on an answer based on who I'm talking to and what they are likely looking to hear. So if a person has travel experience, or if they understand what nomadic life is in general, then I will say I was born in the Philippines, but I've lived everywhere else. And then I share the list of countries I've lived in. And then I say, so I don't really call any of these places home. Right now, home is London. If it's a third culture kid, I just say, I live in London at the moment. And they understand what that means immediately. And if it's somebody that is a professional at work, for example, then I just let them know that I was born in the Philippines. I recently moved to London, but I lived around China too. So I have different answers, but they all kind of summarize where I have lived, if that makes sense.
Definitely not going into detail too much, because as you just mentioned, like it depends on which environment you're in and who you're talking to. If those people are actually, really interested in your story and have a sense of understanding as well, if that makes sense. But it's interesting
we actually have a thing in the community where we say long version or short version. Like, do you want the long version of where I'm from, or do you want the short version? And everybody has their own unique way of sharing the long or short version.
I love this. And when it comes to, I mean, we've been talking about your challenges, and we've been talking about the community you've built over the past 2 years. Let's talk about like your future plans. Is London going to be home in quotes, for the next 2 years as well? Or what are your future plans in general?
So I am planning to stay in London for at least another year or two. I predict that I will likely continue to keep it as a base forever. I'm about to get the UK citizenship, so I'll technically be from the UK-ish. And my partner is half English and half Irish, so his family is in London, so we will come back all the time if we move anywhere. But my partner loves to travel too, and he has suggested Australia or America. And we've also talked about Spain as a place to move to. So I don't know, but I would like to live somewhere else for a period of time before it really settling down in one location. But in terms of the actual location where we would choose to settle down, I have no idea right now. At the moment, my focus is on my career and TCK Global, and my partner is doing the same with his career. So at the moment, it's London for the next few years, but then we'll see.
Where do your parents live, may I ask?
My parents live in the Philippines.
So you're traveling in between as well. You're traveling to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Having like relationship, basically.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen my family in 7 years now because of the visa issues I've had. And I've like, it's always something to do with the visa, and then COVID. And then recently it's been my switch from working for one company to starting my own small business. But I am planning to see them hopefully at the end of this year. And they currently live in the Philippines, but my youngest sister has moved to Canada now. So we're trying to figure out when a good time is when she is back and when I can go back. And my brother recently moved back from having lived in the States. So it's easier now to plan when I should come than before.
How does this work out, like staying in touch with your family over different countries?
It's pretty easy. I think we got so used to it from a very young age that it doesn't really make much of a difference in our relationship. I actually think for me and my parents, it has made the relationship much healthier because we had to learn how to communicate to each other, and we are very culturally different. So I had a very unstable upbringing because of all the turmoil that the cultural differences caused. So after I left, I was able to mature, my parents were able to mature, and then our communication got healthier and healthier over time online, through phone calls, video calls, messages. So it's been pretty good. Yeah. It doesn't really feel like I haven't seen them in that long.
That's incredible. So if you have any tips on how to stay connected with your family abroad, I'm so looking forward to collect all the tips you have, to be honest, because that's something I'm struggling with, especially at the moment. So if you have any advice on this, I'm more than happy to, yes, if you could share it, because I know that so many out there have, making a similar experience than I'm doing at the moment. And that's one of the more challenging parts of living abroad, to be honest, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, it can be like relationship management with many people can be very difficult, particularly if you started off really close in the same location as them, because people change over time, right? Like as they grow up to be adults, they will change pretty drastically. And it's that period of time where if you didn't solidify your relationship when they were very little and you don't maintain it consistently, then it's likely that you will have distance between you because they're growing up in a different direction. So for example, in my family, my brother and I are really close, but we solidified our relationship from when we were very young, and we maintained our communication online on a very regular basis. My younger sisters and I, we are close, but for one of them, the relationship dynamics changed over time because of how she's changed as a person, how I've changed as a person, and our communication styles online are different. I'm more sporadic, and it is very dependent on everyday life, whereas she likes to keep it very, very consistent. So there's a mismatch in how we are able to communicate online. And with my baby sister, she's more similar to me. She's very sporadic. When she was younger, we have a 10-year gap between us. it was hard for us to maintain a relationship online. So what I would do is send her very long like letters that she could read, and she would just read them and not really reply for the longest time. But now she's gone to uni and we have video calls and we're able to connect much more. So that relationship kind of blossomed over time because of her age and because of, I've been wanting to consistently have that relationship with her, but I also had to wait for her to want that with me in a way that works for us on a communication level online. So I would say just be consistent in their life in any way you can. So send them things, send them letters, emails, send them things that remind them of you. But then over time, try and develop some kind of system so that the number of times you communicate per year and the quality of the conversations that you have with them per year is a certain amount that works for you and also them. Because if it's too much for them, if it's too much for you, then it will get strenuous and you might start to resent maybe having left. And if it's too much for them, they might start not wanting to have conversations with you anymore because it's too hard to keep up. So I think just finding the right balance between how you communicate online and the type of relationship that you want to develop through your quality conversations when you have them are the biggest keys that you can have.
Yeah, I think
it was helpful.
No, it is definitely. It's lovely that you are sharing so much on a personal aspect as well. That you are, when it comes to this, that you're an open book. I feel like I can ask you anything. You make me feel very comfortable here as well. And I mean, the idea is to interview you, obviously, but I'm also very curious on how others are handling specific aspects on their life. And I feel like when it comes to this, you are like a few more steps ahead of me, if that makes sense. So I can definitely learn from you. And I was just like, okay, let me just ask this one personal question because that's one of my biggest struggles at the moment. Not having your loved ones across the street, for example, because this is always going to be part of our relationship. So, and I'm mentioning this so many times. In the content I'm creating, that there are in our case, two different continents involved. So there's no middle way, And in the end, you do have to go with the flow, first of all, and do what you feel comfortable with, what you feel is right. But sometimes it can be quite stressful in a way, moving out of your comfort zone so many times. And sometimes you're just like, oh, I'm so sick of it. At least this is how I am feeling. It can be quite overwhelming. And then I know that so many out there are making the same experience. And the solution, in my opinion, is like, first of all, what you've just mentioned, communication, open communication, but also then like what you're working on with your community, building a sense of belonging and knowing that you're not alone out there and that there's so many others exchanging experience. And I just love what you're doing. And I think you're doing an amazing job of educating others and taking challenges together with others in similar situations. So that basically leads me to the next question. What's your plan with the TCK family? What's your bigger goal? Let me phrase it like this, because I know there are a few things waiting ahead of you as well.
So for TCK Global, what I've learned over the years is the community is the community. So basically they're my ship captain. They tell me what I need to do moving forward just by being part of the community. And I just listen to all of their feedback, and I can't always be in every single conversation because I would have no life left, but I do listen. So, and I go through a lot of the conversations that they have, and I try and identify what it is that they need in that period of time and what it is that they could use in the future. And something I've found is, there are a lot of people that really do require extra education on being a third culture kid, how to navigate life as a third culture kid, how to build relationships. And there are also a lot of parents of third culture kids who need similar help in educating themselves on how to bring up third culture kids and how to understand the difference in their dynamics versus their children. So a lot of my energy at the moment is going towards educational resources for third culture kids and their parents. So there will be some, I don't want to share exactly what they are because I haven't even announced it to the community. So I'm not going to share exactly what they are, but they are educational resources for the community. I am also starting to think about building some kind of maybe system or some kind of way where I can help parents on a more of like a coaching or one-to-one type of sessions where they can start to understand their third culture kids through my lens, because I am a third culture kid and because I have had so many conversations with third culture kids that I've received a lot of questions from parents like, I'm about to move or make my third move. We're about to have another child. Can you help us in deciding whether or not this is a good idea, or what are the things that we should consider and stuff? So I might start up some kind of consulting practice to help third culture kid parents that really want to deep dive into understanding the pros and cons of whatever decisions that they might be making with their third culture kids in mind. And then for my community in general, it's more of an iterative process. Like, my community is very adaptable. So at the moment, there are some people in there that are job hunting at the same time. I actually just had a call with all of them today. And I realized that it would be nice for us to have a job hunting subgroup, so that people who are job hunting at different times can come into the subgroup and just hang out, or look for jobs together or share job hunting experiences with each other. So in terms of the community itself, that will always be an iterative system or with different types of groups inside. And in terms of what I do, as a creator, it will be centered around education. And I've been writing a book, but it's taking me a while to release it. But that there will be a book that is made for third culture kids, and it has a sister book that's made for the parents of third culture kids. But the idea is that every piece of content that I want to create for the world will be in line with helping third culture kids build relationships with each other or their parents.
This is actually very interesting because, as mentioned, I did my research as well, and I follow you on Instagram. I checked out your TED Talk, which I can highly recommend. I think it summarizes pretty well your journey as well, and the hurdles that cultural kids are taking in general, without doing a deep dive on it. But so for everyone who wants to get an overview, check out Jay's TED Talk. So one more question when it comes to your network, when it comes to community, because as mentioned, that's your main focus. So your main focus is the community. The community is leading which direction you are taking together, but also you as an individual. I will link everything in the description of the video, but also in the side notes, so that people that have a similar history, similar journey as yours will be able to connect with you, but also will be able to join your Discord community, your Discord server.
We also have WhatsApp groups. And then something that we do in the communities, that when we stop over in somewhere in a city, we'll message people in the group. And we have different location groups as well, so people can end up meeting each other when they're on travels, or if they move somewhere where other TCKs in our community are.
I love this. So they see each other in person. That's definitely a different connection than once you see. I've made this experience as well, being able to connect with the one or other you met online out of sudden in person. It's a different layer, definitely. Right? It's a different layer. Yeah. But getting back to the part of you being very, very well connected, like when it comes to resources at the moment, I mean, obviously your community is one resource. Your book will be one resource. Your work in general, so what's waiting ahead of you will be one resource. But what other resources are there?
So one of the things I'm building is actually a content library. So that will also be a resource. Ruth van Reken's book, Culture Kids, Growing Up Among Worlds. I'm not sure if you've heard of the book, but it's a very popular book known as the TCK Bible across the community. That book will give you a lot of insight, and parents a lot of insight, on what a third culture kid is, how third culture kids exist, the feelings that they encounter, a lot of the psychology behind how it works. That is a great resource. Not anyone, but on Instagram, there are quite a few more pages popping up that are third culture kid centric. They're not all educational, but they do provide a lot of emotional material that people can read and relate to. So it's very relatable content that help people feel, or third culture kids feel, like they're not alone. There are also meetup groups. You can go on meetups.com and you can find a couple of them there. There's a community on Instagram that also holds I have a chat for them, TCK NYC, and they have their own TCK community that they regularly meet up with in New York City. So that's also somewhere that you can turn to. there are a lot of PhDs who, I believe they're PhDs, or students who are writing their thesis that share different topics within the third culture kid topic. I don't have a list right now, but I can share with you some of their material. Yeah, those would be the key ones. And if you want to access third culture kid therapists, there are quite a few of them. It's just a handful, but there's still, a good amount. And then generally, international school counselors are good people to go to about the topic if you're a parent and you have a kid in an international school, because they will likely at least have come across the term before and have come across multicultural parents and children, and will know how to help with some of the initial third culture kid issues that a TCK might be facing when they've left school or even during school.
Those are a lot of resources already, but I'm sure it took you a while as well to gather all this together and able to provide it for your community as well. And yeah, I mean, I can sense obviously you're very, very into this topic.
It was all actually quite organic. Like people would reach out to me to, for their thesis and stuff. So, but yeah, it did take quite a while. It's a very slow knowledge hub online at the moment.
Yeah, but I do see that as well, that the term third cultural kid is a term that's being used more often, especially on social media. I do see a lot of Insta accounts, like it's getting out there more and more, which I love. Yeah, and I'm very curious where your journey is going to lead you. So I'm gonna keep on following, obviously. One last question before we end this conversation. And I know it's a big question, but it's one of my favorite questions while recording podcast episodes. What is your biggest advice in general in life? Your biggest life advice? Let's phrase it like this.
I think my biggest life advice. It's a good question. I think my biggest life advice, it's more like a saying or a thing I have in my head. Everyone is going to die. It sounds morbid, but because everyone will have the same ending, it's a good opportunity to take risk. So just do the thing that you want to do, that you find scary to do. Try the new project that you want to try, build the new relationship that you want to build, ask the person out, do whatever it is that you feel like doing, but you're a little afraid to do, because at the end of the day, they're going to die, you're going to die, everyone's going to die. So while that is a scary and sad thought for some people, for me, it's kind of like a little gift, because it kind of frees me to do the things that I want to do without thinking too much about, of course, don't do anything illegal. I'm not promoting that, but it removes the barrier of fear, because failing is something that I think everybody needs to go through. And, failure is just a learning lesson for everybody. And thinking that everyone has the same ending kind of eliminates that fear for me. So my biggest advice would be to just remember that everyone has the same ending. So there's no need to have that fear to stop you from doing the thing that you want to do.
Thank you so much. And with this, I'm going to end this podcast recording, because I think there couldn't be a better ending. So thank you so much for taking your time today, for being so open-minded, for sharing your experience, for doing the work you're doing, for connecting people, and for sharing so many personal aspects of your life as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina. It was really, really nice of you. Thank you for reaching out. I'm very excited to hear this podcast. I will definitely be sharing this with the TCKs on TCK Global. And there is actually an intercultural couple that met on TCK Global that just got married. So I'm sure this will be relevant to them too. But yeah, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's very relevant for a lot of people, including myself. So I'm also going to continue following you and your page and watch the progress that you make.
Thank you so much.